If you've been a subscriber to this channel for any length of time, you cannot fail to have noticed that I've got quite a few reoccurring themes. The first one of these is Nixie tubes. I've featured these in a number of videos just because I like the way they look. And you'll have seen me make videos about them in watches and clocks and even in a calculator. Now, another thing that I feature quite a lot is Vintage HiFi. Now, my particular favourite era of Vintage HiFi is the 1970s, when you get the silver look, the brushed steel hi-fis, lots of dials and switches on them, and big old bouncing VU needles. Now, there was a period in time when those two things combined, Nixie tubes and hi-fi. In the early 70s, some of the first hi-fi components that were radio tuners that had a digital display, that display was made up of Nixie tubes. The most common of these, as far as I can tell, was the Revox A720. This was a pre-receiver, so that's a preamp and a radio receiver in one component. And the display was made up of Nixie tubes. You still see these for sale quite frequently on eBay, although they do command quite a high price nowadays. Now, another reoccurring theme of this channel is VU needles, as I mentioned, or displays, bouncing LEDs, anything that sort of shows that the music's playing, some sort of reaction to the music, those kind of things. I don't know what you'd call them, music visualizers, that kind of thing. I really like my music, as well as playing something, to have some sort of visual effect. So there was a period in time, again back in the 70s, when there were other people like me that liked their music to have some sort of display at the same time, and the hi-fi manufacturers catered for these people by putting in oscilloscopes into some of the radio tuners. Now, it wasn't just for display. It was used to tune the radio in perfectly. It had a little display that helped you get your signal just right. If you got sort of echoey signals, it'd show that, all that kind of stuff. But I think for most people that bought it, they're on the high-end radio tuners. They probably just wanted something that looked flashy and cool, and that's pretty much what I like. Now, there was one component, only one as far as I know, that combined Nixie tubes and an oscilloscope in a radio tuner, and it's the SAE Mark 6. Now, I've been on the lookout for a radio tuner for quite some time, and this has been a particular one that I've been looking for probably for over 5 years now. Anyway, I finally managed to get hold of one recently, and I'm going to show it to you here today. So without any further ado, let me show you the SAE Mark 6 tuner from 1971. When it's switched off, it's a very understated machine. In fact, it wouldn't really look out of place if you brought this out nowadays, except for perhaps those paddle switches at the bottom in the middle. But they even replaced them themselves in 1974 when they brought out the SAE Mark 6B, and that one was discontinued in 77. But mine's the earlier edition, the Mark 6, which ran from 71 through to 74. Now, SAE stands for Scientific Audio Electronics. They were a manufacturer of high-end components, and they were around from 1968 to 1985 when they were sold, and eventually went bankrupt in 1992. On the back, we've got the inputs for the aerial. You can choose between a 300 ohm or a 700 ohm input, and then we've got outputs for the left and right stereo channels, and there's a variable one and there's a fixed one. The variable one can be adjusted in volume, and then we've got the input, so we can put another component into this and watch it displayed on that oscilloscope, and then we've got the 4-channel MPX out. Now, this particular machine, I think it only came out in the US. This machine's from the US, I imported it, so it's running on 120 volts, but it's 50 or 60 hertz. And if you were curious as to what that MPX out was for, well, this is all it says in the manual, but basically MPX was supposed to be a 4-channel radio broadcast that went over FM and could be split up into the 4 individual channels using a separate decoder, but it never happened. I've got to mention that the manual I've got came to me courtesy of Jim at Jim's SAE site. He was kind enough to scan his in and send it on to me. If you want to know more about the SAE company and all the products that they brought out, definitely pop over to Jim's SAE site, if for nothing else, just to look at the pictures on there. It's absolutely amazing the amount of SAE equipment that Jim owns. But anyway, back to that manual for a second. If you look at the top here, it says components for the connoisseur, which to me means two things. One, they were very expensive, but two, they were also very well made. You can tell that because they were offering a 5-year warranty, which according to them was unprecedented. Okay, enough chit-chat, enough background, let's get this thing switched on. Now, rather unusually, the power switch is located towards the middle, and you flip it upwards to turn it on. You can see now we've got the frequency showing on those lovely Nixie tubes, and also on the left-hand side, the oscilloscope is giving a visual representation of the sound that it's hearing. Now, for this demonstration, I've got this one set up to a temporary indoor aerial, which isn't getting a particularly good signal. But I do have it set up properly. It's going to be in the HiFi unit, which does have access to a proper outdoor aerial connection. But I just wanted to demonstrate it to you, but I just wanted to point out why the reception on this one's a little bit fuzzy. Anyway, talking about tuning, as you turn the dial on the right, the oscilloscope on the left gives you bits of information about what you're doing. If you look in the manual, you can see that A would be an out of tune signal, B would mean you're just before the station, C would mean you're exactly right, and D would mean you've gone past it. But there's more to it than that. The height of the line up the screen indicates the strength of the signal, so towards the top of the screen means a nice strong signal, and the width of the line also indicates the volume of the passage that's being played, and then various wavy lines mean things like you've got an echoey signal. And then once you've got it tuned, you can have the display show a visual representation of the sound that's coming through. So let's just have a listen for a moment. And if you prefer, you can turn off the visualization of the music and just have the tuning signal displayed.
Yo, it's a at the beginning when we started. Good chemistry between me and you, girl, regarded.
Now, I have to be very careful here not to play enough music to hit a copyright strike, so you'll have to excuse me for talking over this a little bit. Now, let's just look at the different controls that are on this. So starting at the bottom left, we've got a dial there that lets us choose between mono or stereo, or have it automatically select between the two depending on what's coming through on the radio station. The display dial lets us choose between the FM tuning display, or the oscilloscope can show what the audio sounds like from the radio, or it can show what the external input sounds like. You might have noticed that the digital display goes up in odd numbers, so if I wanted to tune into 104.0, I can't. I've got to go to 103.9 or 104.1. It's not a fault, it's something that's mentioned in the manual. Now, when you tune into a stereo signal, you get the red light coming on at the top there, and when you're in mono, you get the amber light that's just below it. That tuning dial has great weighting to it. You can spin it, it'll carry on going after you've let go, and it enables you to get to one end of the dial from the other very quickly, and you can tune into the frequency that you want, or one digit off, very easily. The level will adjust the volume on that variable output that we saw on the back of the machine earlier on, which is great for getting this component to sound the same volume level as the other components in your setup. Now, if you want the radio to mute when it's between stations and it's just picking up static, you can turn that on and adjust the threshold of that with the dial on the right, the sensitivity. And then on the left here, if we turn on that filter, that will also help with some stereo signals that have got a bit of interference on them. Now, you've got to bear in mind that my machine's approximately 45 years old, and that oscilloscope is on all the time the thing is playing music. There's no way to switch it off, so by now it's probably a little bit faded, and I think it's also a little bit out of focus, but I wanted to demonstrate it a little bit more in this video. But when you're playing the radio through it, or just any normal music, you just get this kind of scratchy mess on the screen, which doesn't actually look that interesting. So in order to demonstrate the oscilloscope display a little bit more clearly, I thought I'll hook this thing up to my Oscillator. Now, if you don't know what a Oscillator is, it's basically a synthesizer that lets you loop and layer sounds. Let me give you a quick demonstration. So from that, you'll understand why I don't really use this very much. I don't have any kind of musical timing or ability, but what this does let me do is produce some interesting sounds, like this, for example. So when we put that into the oscilloscope, this is what it looks like. Now there are some controls for the oscilloscope, so I'll just show you what those do. So just to the right of the screen we've got these 4 dials. That one is the focus, the one to the right is the horizontal positioning, the one above that is the vertical positioning, and then the top left one is the intensity or brightness, and I've got it set all the way up to the top. And there's one final control which effectively is a zoom. It's a 3-way paddle switch, and as I move it you can see the object changes size. Okay, so let's just take a minute or so to run some different sounds through the oscilloscope to see what happens. So there you go, that was a bit creepy in parts really. There was a bit in the middle that sounded like Billie Jean as well, but anyway, we'll move on. I'm sure some people want to look at the insides of this, so let me undo all 12 screws. If a measure of a device's quality was how many screws were in it, then this is up there with the best. But as you can see, it's lovely and clean in here. Let me just point some things out. I'm no electrical engineer, but let me go through the basics. So this is your tuning dial. You can see the big brass weight on the back of that, and you've got a belt that goes into a separate tuning device that's all encased in a metal case. We've got the Nixie tubes, which are ZM1000s by the look of it there. Nice circuit board, nicely laid out, nice and clean, but also notice there's 2 silicon chips on there. Remember, this is a design from 1971, so these are pretty early as far as chips go in hi-fi components. Motorola chips there, might be of interest to someone. That's the oscilloscope display at the back there. It's encased in some sort of metal shroud, presumably to stop interference getting onto the radio. There's another circuit board here which has got some more stuff on it that looks all nicely laid out. Metal cases everywhere enclosing things. The whole idea is of course to stop interference and get a good quality radio signal. Now there's another panel on the bottom. Once I've took all those 12 screws out, you can have a look in there as well. The layout of this is just beautiful. I don't know anything about electronics, but I can tell you that this looks like it's been made with some care and attention and a lot of effort. And remember, 45 years old and working perfectly. These switches are nice on the top here, these big paddle switches, and as I say, they replaced those in the 1974 revision of this, so this is the earlier model. Now down towards the bottom we've got a circuit board which goes underneath the oscilloscope, but to the right of that, if we flip that round, we can see that this particular component looks like it was made in November 1970. Now if we look at that circuit board again, there's a few pots on there which will control various things about the oscilloscope display. For example, this one says Spot K1, and then on the other side we've got H and V, which of course are going to be horizontal and vertical. But even to a layperson like me, I can tell that the construction of this thing is second to none. No expense has been spared. The layout of this and the way it's been put together is just beautiful. The attention to detail, the number of man hours that must have gone into this must be astonishing, and someone wouldn't be able to make anything like this, I don't think, nowadays. How much did it cost? 1971? Well, $1,050. Stick that into the dollar times inflation calculator. Current price equivalent $6,240 for an FM tuner. So as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the SAE Mark 6 is probably unique in the fact that it's got a Nixie tube tuner as well as an oscilloscope display. And it's still useful as well. It's an FM radio tuner. I can put this into my hi-fi and listen to FM radio just like somebody could have done 45 years ago. The only difference is 45 years ago I would never have been able to afford a piece of equipment like this. Anyway, that's it for the moment. As always, thanks for watching.
Online at fow.co.uk. Get a solid shed from solidsheds.com today. See our huge range of top outdoor buildings, perfect for an office, workshop, storage and so much more. Plus all sheds include treatment, delivery and free erection.
Big selection, free erection. We've got every shed need at solidsheds.com. Solidsheds.com.